Welcome back to another episode of BRevity Box. I'm Charlie. I'm without Brando today, and I'm going to let him make his sad excuses when he comes back because I don't think there's a good reason for him to miss an episode. Who cares if he has a 9-to-5 job? I mean, this is about priorities. Anyhow, I'm on my own, so to speak, and my guest today is somebody I'm excited about. A longtime friend of mine that looked better than me as a groomsman on my wedding day, and it's something I haven't gotten over quite yet. I still find it hurtful every time I look at my wedding photos. Of course, I see myself and my beautiful wife, and my groomsmen are there next to me, but there's this one guy who's clearly just hogging the spotlight, and I just haven't forgiven him for it yet. But he's one of those people who's also the kind of guy you want on your side. He's one of those guys that you're glad is out there, like, doing good, like a do-gooder. I mean, that's essentially the way that I stupidly understand his career, is that he's basically out there keeping hardworking people from ending up face down in the guarantees. He's one of my best friends, and I'm glad to have him on the show. Dave, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for taking the time to do it.
Yeah, no problem, Chuck. Happy to be here.
Charlie,
very kind
Charles.
words, and I obviously came to your wedding specifically to take the spotlight away from you and your beautiful wife.
Yeah, and you succeeded. I mean, you danced your way down the aisle, clearly highlighting cruelly how the other people didn't have rhythm. You had to shove your rhythm in everybody's face. Look at Dave. Dave can dance. Dave looks good in clothes.
Another thing that the white man is shoving in people's faces. Right?
No, man. Yeah, I mean, obviously, funny to have you on. I've been making my first few episodes in the show clearly about my friends, but I kind of noticed that I have this interesting cast of individuals that I call my friends. And maybe my wedding was that moment where I kind of looked around me and felt really lucky that I had all these kind of unique and different people that I was connected with. And our friendship stands out to me. Everybody has their own reasons, but man, I've never had in my adult life. Like, I remember when I was a kid, you'd run across people, like some kid on the playground, and you just knew you had that step brothers moment. Did we just become best friends? And I remember that moment as an adult at a wedding of really, I knew one person that was connected to the group. And it was like you and I in a hotel lobby in the middle of the night. That's not where we met. I know we met when I kicked your ass on a Grand Prix go-kart track. I think I lapped you like 3 times.
Grand Prix. Oh, man. I think you're talking your own involvement up a little bit there.
Now, let's not tell the story about how I paid the guy to tell me which was the fastest car. That may or may not have happened.
Well, it doesn't really matter that you paid somebody for the fastest go-kart that day. It's the fact that my dumbass somehow selected the slowest go-kart
you did
that day.
You were
and everybody on that day was passing me and fucking running into my backside on that track all day long.
The funniest thing is the way that while you were going around the track, you're literally looking at your car like you're a professional driver. Like, what can I do here? What's causing me drag? What am I making? Like
pushing the car along the track to try to get to go.
That's the competitor in you, man. That's the competitor in you. No, but I remember that lobby, middle of the night, trying not to get kicked out of a hotel on your buddy's wedding night. And you and I are tag teaming this hotel manager to make everything kind of
3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, on bachelor party night. And it was that Step Brothers moment, like where I think we both kind of realized we were riffing, and we kind of had this guy like a good WWE match. We knew we were about to pin him and get the 3 count. And it was like, from that point on, it was just friends. Easy peasy.
Well, and I mean, I'm sure you remember this. Obviously, that was it was a crazy night. That was a crazy wedding night. We weren't even getting kicked out of our own hotel room. We were getting kicked out of one of the bridesmaids' hotel room that she allowed us to stay in. But I mean, just coincidentally, at the time you were living in Tucson, and I had, I think, probably 2 weeks prior to us going down to to Arkansas for that get together, I'd been notified that I was being transferred to Tucson. So I mean, it was serendipity
That's
all the
right.
way. So even though it was
Weird.
like kind of
Absolutely
strange
weird.
that we met, obviously would have been fast friends anyway. But once I moved down there and said this at your wedding, you and Brooke, you guys really, really saved my life, because moving to a new place and not knowing anybody, it's a tough thing. And I don't know what I would have done without you guys.
And you hated it there.
Oh, fuck
you
yeah.
hate if there's seriously the worst place for somebody who loves the outdoors who's from Minnesota is to send them to Tucson, Arizona. I mean,
now I will be honest. I mean, the scenery
right?
in Arizona is probably the only thing that I was like, man, this is beautiful. Even when I lived in Phoenix for that short amount of time, it was fine. But the heat and the people, I'm sorry, people. Apart from you guys, apart from some family and other folks, obviously Brando and Mike and those kind of guys.
Oh yeah, no, just dole out the exceptions there, Gringo. No, you know.
But at the same time, I mean, working in what I do and going to Arizona and doing what I do is like you got to be ready for adversity. You got to be ready for people not exactly welcoming you with open arms once you say, "Hey, I'm here to talk to you about forming a union in Arizona," and they're like, "We don't need no union. We don't want no union." And
yeah, red state, illegal. Big time.
Yeah, not like
so.
Minnesota.
Let's just jump into that because, well, and so this is a lot of. Your Minnesota-ness is a lot of what I want to try to talk about because of recent events and obviously you're one of the I think you're a good representation of a blue collar liberal, and I don't think there's a lot of that salt of the earth liberal voice out there enough personally. And you're also kind of this, you've chosen a career out of making that fight. And I want you to be the one to describe it because I'm going to do a terrible job. I mean, I say, like I said at the intro, keeping people from ending up face down in the guarantees. I like saying that. It's totally a steal from Beck and a great song, but it fits. But maybe you can do a better job of telling us what it is that you do.
Yeah. So I've gone by many different titles, but essentially I think what most people would probably understand is that I'm a union representative, and I fight for people that are facing difficult situations in their work life. There's a lot of different functions that unions provide, and that I think is probably on the upswing as far as popularity is concerned, and that's actually a pretty recent development that is hugely encouraging, I think, to our world. It's the resurgence of the labor movement writ large. Not specific unions, but Fight for 15. The COVID obviously has really brought forward a lot of the safety issues that are out there in the workplaces. What I do now is a lot different than what I used to do. I got into the union world by being a member of a union, and for running for steward of my shop when I was a security guard. I lost that election, but I think I started really getting more interested in kind of the economy and the partition of wealth to the partition of labor against that wealth, and how really there's nothing that is going to exist except for labor's support in that, and that being not the labor movement, but obviously people working and people making sacrifices for their families and supporting each other when the chips are down. So I went from there to just, I was looking for an actual career move. I graduated from college and I started organizing. I started working with Service Employees International Union, and started working on a child in-home daycare campaign here in Minnesota. And I believe that was 2005. It's been a long time. And from there I went.
So that was right before we met.
Yeah. Well, let's see what had happened, because we met in 2006. Yeah. So it started there. I was kind of an intern apprentice thing. Kind of got the bug for it. And essentially I was driving around Minnesota, knocking on people's doors that were licensed in-home daycare providers, and talking to them about forming a union, because it had actually just occurred for the first time in the United States in Illinois, before we had started working in Minnesota and trying to organize those childcare providers. From there, I went and I applied to the training program through SEIU in DC, and was accepted. That was a 2-month stint in DC. I got sent to ATL, and we organized the Aramark employees at Turner Field. This is when the Braves were doing super bad, so I went to a ton of Braves games that year. There was nobody in the stands, and we got that. There was 4 different units that we were. Units are bargaining units, or populations of workers. It's just kind of just a stupid, it's technical lingo of how they organize things within.
Sounds military almost. Act. Units, yeah. Platoons,
right? Kind of. So we got 4 units. I believe it was, sales, it was concessions, there was environmental services, and something else I can't remember. We got all 4 units to majority card signs, signing of membership cards within 2 weeks. And we're talking like strong majorities, like 60% plus. And I heard some of the most tragic stories of my life. I'll never forget some of the stories that I heard. Driving through the poorer parts of Atlanta, College Park, Decatur, and even some folks that were outside of that Atlanta area. We were staying in Union City, which is just south of Atlanta, and some of the rural parts just absolutely depressed. I'll never forget one story. Just a small little quick aside is this.
Yeah, please. I was about to ask. Yeah, give me some.
Yeah, I mean, there was this woman who we were talking to at her house, and her whole family was there. That's one thing I remember. Her whole family lived there. Now, I'm talking like 20 people lived in this 2-bedroom apartment. And she was telling me the story about how she worked for the contractor Aramark, which is obviously one of the largest food service and contracting companies in the whole entire world. And her job was to sell merchandise. And remember, I said it was one of the downturns of Atlanta baseball, so nobody was coming to the games. But they stationed her on the 4th level concourse, so nobody's sitting there. Essentially, nobody's up there, and she has this merchandise cart that she's staffing, and she's only selling last year's merchandise, the merchandise that nobody buys. Right? Nobody buys this shit. Nobody bought it last year. Nobody's buying it this year. And she's making, I want to say it's below $3 an hour to staff this cart.
Because
her cart. What's that?
With the commission, where they set up, was it supposed to be a commission sales, or they were that's the pay rate was $3?
I think it was just the pay rate. I mean, some of these details are getting fuzzier and fuzzier as these things go on. But obviously, she's not selling anything. So if it was commission, she's not getting shit. And if she's making this amount of money, it's because there's no other opportunity for her in her area. There's no other economic opportunity if they were afforded. I mean, Turner Field, smack dab south of the city center. It's in a depressed area. Obviously, it was a land grab when they built that thing. Probably got it on the cheap. But anyway, that's hard enough to hear. But the other side is that this woman, her stand was set up right across the concourse from a bathroom, and she was not allowed to just go and use the bathroom. She had to shut her stand down. She had to calculate all of the money in the till. She had to close it all off, to go to the bathroom. That took 15 minutes to close it all down. And then she had come back. She had to open it back up, which took another 15 minutes. And I mean, hearing things like that is really, it's infuriating. It's really something that makes you really angry, you know? So that's kind of the drive that I had.
Especially over something like that too, like a literal call of nature.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a corporate standard to these things. This is how we do things in the corporate world, you know? Everybody's kind of running on this real strict line. And in the South, I mean, you live in New Orleans, you know exactly when you grew up there, you lived your whole life in the South, basically. But you know, that's the most tragic thing that I think I've ever heard in my life was this woman's story. And you know, I don't know what's going on with that union down there right now. It was a Unity local. It's between SEIU and some other organizations. I hope it's still going on, but you know, from there, after ATL,
go ahead, please.
Got sent back to Minnesota, and then you know, my life has just been up until about 2008, traveling from place to place, working campaigns, organizing campaigns. When we were in Tucson, we got the Pima County workers, the first labor agreement in the history of Arizona. When I was there, I helped.
Really?
Yeah. So all the county workers there, except for the courts. Courts are actually carved out as being not able to organize because they're not executive branch in public sector. But yeah, we got them to their first labor agreement. It's not like a contract for Arizona because Arizona is a right to work state, and what that means is basically union security laws are illegal. So you can have members, but then you have to represent everybody, even if they are not a member of the union. So you can't put that kind of clause into your labor agreement. So all that it was effectually called was a memorandum of understanding between the union and the county.
Wow. So what would you attribute the uptick in interest into unions, not just in Minnesota, but you're seeing that across the country? I mean, what would you attribute it to in your experience? You've been doing it for enough time?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, the wage and the wealth gap, the income gap that exists. I think there's a feeling that there's not any opportunity for advancement, and it's actually funny because not that I'm encouraging of this at all, but the meme culture out there about labor is a lot of people are saying, oh, you know what we should do? We should band together and we should like go talk to the bosses collectively, and try to improve conditions that way. And it's like, this concept's been around for quite a long fucking time. It's called unionizing. So I mean, it's but it's interesting because the way, I mean, you see this politically, you see this socially, you see it environmentally. The pendulum swings back, and ever since about 1962, union density has been decreasing in this country. And the pendulum is swinging back because it's a long-standing, fact-based situation that union shops make more money. They have better protections, obviously. They have better health care. And as that density goes down, you see the inequality go up. And so those two things are going to be at such a large divide at this point that the pendulum is going to swing backward. It's going to swing back to people demanding more.
Yeah, I think so. Do you feel? Well, I mean, this is an obvious yes answer, but I'd like more of your insight on it. How much of an emphasis, or I guess, where do you think COVID put a specific highlight on that? Like, are you seeing that as like, where does it play a role in that motivation? I mean, I think that clearly it affected the entire job market. I know people that are working from home and now permanently, like they're not going back to their offices in some cases. Did that put a highlight for a lot of people on you know, I mean, the controversy aside, as far as the loans and support, big businesses taking advantage of that, I didn't pay attention and maybe I missed it. Did it affect a large swath of the kind of people that you represent, and it put a bigger emphasis on the importance of what you do? Like, did you see that?
I think not in my world, but I think, you know, 2020 was such a dumpster fire, but it also, you know, had a lot of huge positives happen that year as well. But one thing that, I mean, for my realization is just, you know, when the chips are all down like that, who becomes the essential? What are the essential functions that you need as a person and as like a family member and somebody who's trying to watch out for your kids and those kind of things? And all of a sudden, I think it really pushed forward the idea that the essential functions of society and the people that are kind of that public facing every day, the folks that are working at a grocery store, a gas station, or your liquor store, or healthcare workers. I mean, healthcare workers, I guess, pushed aside.
Here.
All of a sudden, these essential workers they're the ones in the most danger. And they've been the ones that are most maligned, have been relegated to the bottom economic rungs of this country for a long fucking time, you know? And that was highlighted in such an unavoidable and unmistakable way for such a large percentage of the population. I mean, I think when we talk about essential workers, most people's minds pre-pandemic would say it's your firefighters, it's your police, it's your healthcare workers, utility operations, you know, the things that make the functional pieces of life continue on. Can I flush my toilet? Can I turn my lights on? But when those things are not, the things going away, but the things of like, oh, can I go to the grocery store and still be safe? Can I do the regular things that I used to take for granted, like go to the mall or take a walk outside, or, you know, all of those things? I think it really made a very stark contrast to, oh shit, like if I didn't have these things, where the fuck would we be then? Like, these people need to be taken better care of,
or to recognize what goes into them, right? Because I've made that metaphor before about a construction metaphor that you were alluding to, as far as like how your home works. You know, I've remodeled more than one home that Brooke and I have lived in, and it's always the joke where if I'm working on anything that goes on behind the walls, okay, if I'm working on plumbing, electrical, anything where if it works how it's supposed to, you'll never think about how it works. You'll never think about that you'll never know how much time went into building that up so that it never has to be thought about. You just know that it's there and it's a staple and you never think about it again. Mm-hmm. And it's a joke in my house because, you know, if I do all the work on the plumbing and then cover everything back up with sheetrock, she can come in and go, "What'd you do today?" And I'm like, well, I mean,
you're like, well, honey, the toilet still doesn't work. So
I mean, yeah, right. Here's a bucket. I didn't get enough done. No, I mean, you know, I do think it's similar where you don't, you know, I don't think that the people would look and see that much work goes into those everyday transactional moments that you just sort of move through and don't ever sort of pay attention to, you know? And I mean, and it's, to me, I felt like it was part of the missed communication in a lot of places in the country. I think I said more than one time on the show that I was really surprised, probably wrongfully surprised, and impressed by how New Orleans handled it. And I think that the community here was very good about wearing masks, mainly because they have the community here has a practical sense that there's only so many beds in a hospital, and there's only, you know, that they don't want to overwhelm that, because they've been in natural disaster situations where they're keenly aware it takes everybody doing their part, right? And even if they don't agree politically or whatnot, for the most part, I saw in my area, I can't speak about rural Louisiana, okay, but around my area, most people did wear mask and do the thing. And I felt like the statements from the governor, the statements from the parish president, we don't have counties here, were very, very practical. It was this is not a political issue. Wear the mask, keep the hospitals from getting overwhelmed. And, it was very much like, this is why we're doing it. Do it.
Yeah.
And if not, we'll shut down your restaurant. And there's been some of that. There's definitely people that are willful. And I'm not, I want to go down a negative path talking about them, but that's, my wife's a healthcare worker, and it was always the part that I found frustrating with people who were, anti anything when it came to that masks or something like that. Because for me, the sensibility was, this person is like a special forces. They're not replaceable by people off the street. And if you want to make their jobs and lives easier, and you want to make, you want to keep it to where somebody who's got a appendicitis doesn't end up keeling over in an overcrowded ER, wear the masks. Real simple, right? Like, to me, it was very practical for your own community, XYZ. And, without getting into names and who said what, that's where I think it got made into these bigger issues, right? It got made into these, I'm weak, you're a sheep, blah, blah, blah.
Well, and I mean, it's just, what a dumb thing to hang your hat on. I mean, the thing that, I just never understood the argument on the opposite.
Said.
It's my freedom to not wear a mask. And it's like, what fucking freedom are you losing? I mean, honestly, what freedom are you losing by not wearing a mask, or by wearing a mask? Your freedom to infect other people with a deadly disease? Like, that's not a freedom. That's not your right. You don't have the right to do that. It always confused me. And
if I wanted to make somebody conform, I would have, I would have done it with something more stylish. It wouldn't have been just like, I just
pants. I mean, pants for leg jam.
Christ. I mean, what? I think more men should be wearing capris, and I'm ready to say it here on the show.
You heard it here, folks.
No, I mean, I just thought.
Oh man, I could make just the absolute stupidest, cruelest short joke right now. It'd be.
Oh, I'm setting you up.
You missed
so
that.
Well,
you missed that from me. You missed that.
No, I love it. I lean into it. I don't have any issues.
Is it because capri pants are actually regular pants for you?
Hey, they were a Husky Boys large when I got them. Okay.
You're just tired of having to hem those fucking pants every single time you go to this store.
It just, the older I get, the fingers, man, not so much that articulation, very fine detail work. Now, it's
oh man, I mean, Brando. Oh, I wish Brando was here.
Oh, Brando would be leaning into this.
He would have picked up on that immediately. We'd be going on this for like 12 minutes.
Yeah, I wanted him here. I really couldn't get him to call in sick. He needed to do his job. I guess I gotta have respect for that. But yeah, that's why he's here, man. Brando just takes me out at the knees at any given opportunity, and it's often really funny, or he'll just have he's got that voice, man, that I'll be exuberant and happy about something, and he'll just kill the entire fucking mood with 2 words.
Yeah.
I'll ask him some question in anticipation and be like, nope, don't care. And I'll be like, oh.
That was my whole show.
That was all I was going to do. No, man, you had I mean, you hit it on the head saying what a thing to hang your hat on. I wanted to ask you about this. I know we're taking kind of a left turn from you talking about your career and where you were going with it, but being from St. Paul, we're already kind of talking about politics. There's 2 main things I want to get your input on, because I know you'll have a lot of insight and perspective that I think I've been kind of hungry for since it happened, but also pertaining to how you manage relationships, because I think we both work similarly or have a similar, maybe similar standards or boundaries, I guess. But so let's start with the big event from last year, and you being, I mean, how long have you lived in? Yes, your son's birthday. Let's start there. How is it to be a dad, man? Look, we haven't said that, right? You're kind of still in the thrills of being a new parent. How old are your boys?
Oh, my boys are 3. Well, almost 3. Warren is about to be 3 in March, and Holden is 9 months on the 25th.
And
so 2 boys, and obviously, I didn't think you were going to say the big thing that you wanted to talk about, but
no. I'm glad we can talk about that in a second. There's a lot of people talking about that.
No. Holden was born on that day, on May 25th. So, my wife.
By the way, yeah. Let's. I mean, I want. I'm gonna give you. I want to set this up because I remember now that you've refreshed my memory about what was going on before then. We're failing to mention the fact that for you personally, that stress of having to go through giving birth in the time of COVID must have been absolutely crazy. And again, my wife is a NICU employee, RN. So,
right.
I mean, I'm aware of those restrictions. That must have been really tough emotionally, man.
It was, and I think obviously a lot more so for my wife.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I mean, just the beginnings of that. It was. I mean, just the whole entire sequence of events. Honestly, was kind of ridiculous. My son, we had his birthday party. My older son. We went to this indoor water park. We just had, all just the best time. Had all the people there. This is March. So, I mean, at that point, I had honestly been not touching surfaces for 2 months at that point already. I mean, not to say, hey, everybody, I told you so, but in January, I was like, this shit coming out of Wuhan is going to get crazy. It's going to come all over the world. I was stashing napkins in my pockets. Wouldn't touch any door handles, wouldn't do anything. But there we were, in this big water park and having this fantastic time. For his second birthday. And then the day after that, he had a minor surgery. So it was an elective surgery that he had to get. He had this thing in his mouth. It was called a mucocele that needed to be surgically removed. Yeah. Had to go under anesthesia, all that kind of stuff. So that happened the day after. And then 3 days later, they canceled all elective surgeries in our state. So we just snuck in this surgery that we've been kind of planning on for a number of months. And then 2 days after that, the whole entire state shut down, essentially. So we were like, okay, well, this is going to be a short-term thing. And we were hearing some of the reports coming out of New York at the time. And New York in March and April were the epicenter for our country, obviously. And some of the things that we were hearing about mothers going in and giving birth was just absolutely fucking barbarian. Spouses or partners were not allowed in the room for the birth. If there was any kind of test that came back positive, the baby would have to stay in the NICU for 2 weeks at least. The mother wouldn't even get to hold the baby after it was birth. So, I mean, between March and May, we had just a number of different kind of fear-induced anxiety attacks about what was making it look like. And then, thankfully there was more information and more data that was reviewed before we ended up going into the hospital. My wife ended up being 42 weeks, I want to say. 41 or 42 weeks when we finally said, this baby ain't coming by himself. So we got into the hospital
right.
on May 25th. I'm not sure if we had heard about what had happened in Minneapolis at that time. When we got to the hospital, it was in the early parts of the evening. So I think in the day we had my sister-in-law and her 2 kids come down and stay at our house to watch after my older son. And so we're probably just going through all that. I don't think we had heard actually what had happened. When we got into the hospital, my son was born at 10:16 that night. And thankfully I was allowed to be in the room. We had to we'd be wearing masks the whole entire time whenever there was staff in the room. So through the birth, I was in a mask and face shields. I mean, it's just all very. There's a certain amount of connection that I think you make with the nursing staff in any. I mean, let's be honest. That nurses make they make everything work. It's the nurses.
I agree.
It's not the doctors. It's fucking not the doctors for sure.
It's the nurses. The nurses are 100% the. Yeah,
it's those folks, and you make a connection with your nurses. I think.
Yeah.
So 25th goes by. The 26th, we wake up early in the morning. Obviously, we got this newborn baby with us, and we turn on the television, and we're seeing this shit fall apart. Crazy things taking place in our cities.
Now, before you go further, because I want to get that part from you too. Good to of course I know everything turns out okay, but let's remind those listening, if you're not fresh on what was going on around May 25th in St. Paul and Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's and the repercussions from the death of George Floyd at the hands of police officers. And this is started an uproar. And now of course it was on the day of, so you're dealing with the birth of your son. There's no way you're completely unaware of it, and so you guys sort of start coming to when all of this is getting built up and about to explode.
Yeah, and this is all in the backdrop of other extremely tragic, police-involved shootings and events that have happened in this area. Philando Castile was shot and killed on a pretty close to actually where I live, in Falcon Heights, which is just
I did not know that.
Yeah, I mean Philando Castile was. This is the hypocrisy of gun rights folks is that Philando Castile was a legal gun owner, could conceal and carry, had a license to do so, notified the police officer that he was a licensed gun owner, and all these motherfuckers saying, well, all lives matter, and got to defend the gun rights. Where the fuck were they when Philando Castile got shot and killed by a St. Anthony police officer? That's just the definition of hypocrisy, and we all know why it is, because he was a black man in America, and
if they would have sold it as gun rights owners,
where were they to defend that?
No, I mean that's
So I mean the guy who had
there was a building up in the area. There was tension already building up, and it's mounted in a the 8-minute video with George.
I don't remember
what happened with George Floyd.
With George Floyd, it was over 8 minutes, almost 9. But I mean, then you had the guy that shot Philando Castile get off.
Yeah,
he was tried and he was acquitted.
That's right, acquitted.
And then Justine Ruszczyk, or Justine Diamond, was shot and killed by a black officer, Muhammad Noor, and he was found guilty. So you have this dichotomy, this different approach, and I think very obviously a different view that people have about the way that justice is being served. Obviously localized for us, but writ large for the greater number of people. The one police officer that has been, convicted of any crime related to a shooting death is black, and the victim is white. Whereas you turn the tables on that, and Geronimo Yanez, obviously he was the police officer who shot Philando Castile. Lighter skinned guy. I'm not entirely sure of his ethnic background, but then you have all of this coming to a head when piece of shit Derek Chauvin kneels on a man's neck for almost 9 minutes and kills him in front of a whole entire crowd of people at 30th in Chicago for allegedly passing a $20 counterfeit $20 bill. So essentially, this police officer and the authority that our society instills into that obviously very dangerous job was that this man could lose his life over $20 at the hands of police. So obviously,
right, and I mean, not even that, and the connection the two of those guys had, and then it was just a horrible image, a horrible moment in history. It results in chaos breaking out in a place that you've called home for. I mean, you are a true diehard Twin Cities man, like
totally. I mean, I got that shit tattooed on my chest.
Literally. Yeah, you do. And I mean,
I am from Wisconsin, though. We'll want to point out, and most
I was going to bring it up.
Minnesotans, they don't want to fucking accept it that we got transplants.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is that this whole, I think people forget that Minnesota has a huge red rural population like Wisconsin does, and there are these big, deep blue, purple epicenters, but there's a lot of those rural voices are still really loud, and I think a lot of controversies come from that. Both in Wisconsin and Minnesota this year. It's been a big highlight on your area of the world.
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin, obviously from 2016, and the shocking upset of our ex-president to take Wisconsin in 2016, to flipping back to blue again. But you got some dumbass like Ron Johnson still being the senator, one of the senators from Wisconsin. Thankfully, I mean, Minnesota, honestly, and if you just look at any kind of electoral map, we're a kind of an island in the upper Midwest. North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan.
That's true.
All turned red. And I mean, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, those are already red, but Michigan, always red. Wisconsin.
Yeah, always red. Yeah.
And then, Minnesota's kind of smack there. I think we have a very balanced approach to governing in our state. I mean, we're probably one of the more successful states, I would say, in the country. We do have a divided government. The Republicans control our state Senate, Democrats control the state House, and we have successive Democratic governors in the executive. We've worked, I think, overall very well together to balance a budget to pass and not.
It's a fun place to visit. It's a beautiful city. I mean, they clearly do well.
What's that? Say that again.
I said it's a beautiful city. It's one of my favorite places to visit. It's I mean, you can tell the success of the place. I mean, it's a nice state to visit as a tourist. I mean, I've been to Duluth with you guys. I've been to a cabin further north of that with another mutual friend of ours, and I mean, I like a lot that Minnesota has to offer, including a lot of my friends live up there. But I think that my sweetness on the city is part of what I wanted to touch on the riots, because there's, it's one of those things where if that's your home and you saw these things sort of happening, and I didn't take it into consideration that that emotional roller coaster must have been nuts. I mean, you must have been, I don't know. Have you recovered yet? I mean, that seems like it would have been exhausting to go through the exhilaration, birth of your second child, and then right into the city's in chaos and buildings are on fire and you're the center of the 24-hour news cycle, and it's just.
Well, and I drove through a while later. I went to college at a small little liberal arts college here in St. Paul called Hamline University. In the heart of the Midway is the area. It's obviously not a real creative term. It's midway in between St. Paul downtown and Minneapolis downtown. So it's a midway. But driving down, it's got this major thoroughfare called Snelling Avenue. And you drive down that area, and it was just seeing the landmarks from, your late teens, early 20s, things that you knew were just, you thought were always going to be there, and the things that were just burned out completely down to rubble. There's an old pharmacy, had been around since the 1940s, called Lloyd's Pharmacy, that just was completely decimated, just burned down to the ground. Right at the corner of Minnehaha and Snelling. And yeah, I mean, it's a shock. It's an absolute shock when you walk out of a hospital. You got this, lack of a better term, this precious little child with you that you just brought into the world, and the world that you just brought him into is on fire. Figuratively,
yeah, literally,
and literally. But the thing that I remember most, because we stayed 36 hours. They wanted to get us in, get us out, but we stayed until I believe it was a Wednesday that we left in that morning. Got home, introduced my older son to his new brother, and we're trying to get the comfortability and the familiarity back. Make sure that our older son knows that it's still love him. He's still our firstborn. He's still our boy. After that, I was like, oh, we got to go to the grocery store. So I, made sure everything was all right at home. Headed out to the grocery store. There's a Cub Foods is a chain grocery store around our area, just real close to my place, and took my regular way to get there. Turned off the highway, took the exit off the highway, and then you got to turn on this little frontage road. Take a left on this little frontage road. And I was about to take this left, and then I see this caddy just like take this corner probably like 30 miles an hour. Just right around this corner, stops right in front of me. And their trunk is flapping up and down. It hadn't been secured, and passenger jumps out of the front, tries to secure the trunk because there's just a bunch of stereo equipment in there. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh, shit.
So I'm like, all right, and they get back on the highway. They're driving to wherever they're doing. And I drive up to the grocery store. That shit is boarded up, because it's on the other side of the parking lot is this strip mall. And the strip mall, it's called the Sunray Strip Mall, at the time was being actively looted when I pulled up. I'm like, okay, well, we're not getting groceries here at all. So went back home. I think later that day I tried to go to some of the exurbs, Woodbury, Oakdale. There's a bunch of grocery, Hy-Vee, Cubs, all that type of shit. Everyone I went to was just closed. So I ended up, we didn't have any food. We didn't have any shit that we need. We have 2 kids at home, and we can't get any food anywhere. So I ended up having to drive to Wisconsin to go and get food. I had to drive to Hudson to get to their grocery store so that I could get groceries. I mean, that kind of, it was a huge frustration, but it all of a sudden was like, this shit is gonna, this impacts all of us, and it impacts obviously the Black community and the BIPOC community a hell of a lot more than it impacts me. But I can't get groceries just like nobody else can get groceries, and I got a newborn son at home, so it's not like it's an option. I'll never forget that.
Well, it just affects everything around you, right? It's the closest thing I can relate to that is, I was living in Arizona at the time Hurricane Katrina hit the New Orleans area, and I had come from Arizona to help my sister work on her house and some other relatives to lesser extent. But I remember driving, my cousin took me to his house in Chalmette, like in this, lower in the floodplain, like got really hit once the levee walls broke. And I remember the desolation of this place that, maybe I didn't have this, like I knew what it was supposed to look like because I had seen it hundreds of times as a kid. And it being in such desolation and just things flattened, and it impacted the entire city because everything was out of stock and everything was overwhelmed. I mean, from bread to drywall, everything was unavailable.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that's the closest thing I can relate to that feeling of impact. And from afar, it just it always looks worse on the camera because I think your mind imagines that that's every part of the city, you know, but
right.
it's amazing that area affects the whole city. It affected everything. You had to leave the state.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I want to be clear that, I mean, that's just an impactful thing of the way that I remember. I mean, because I don't remember everything about those 3 days, but I remember watching the TV. I remember having to do the grocery run. I remember, I remember the tornado warning that had taken place the day in between us getting to the hospital and leaving the hospital, and the fucking tornado warning coming right at a hospital. We had to get into the bathroom with a newborn kid because they didn't have any kind of protocol to like.
As crazy as it sounds, I mean, as crazy as it sounds, this is like a 4 days of a good comedy movie. You know what I mean? Like a guy right? just can't get back to his normal life. Everything I know. And I'm not trying to make light. I hope people understand. I'm just making a little moment of brevity, as it were. But yeah, I mean, I get it. It just can't imagine it. And I wanted to go through it. Must have been just crazy. Has everything where are we at now with the way that area of the city looks? I mean, is it still a scar on the face of everything?
Lake Street is still struggling. I mean, Lake Street is a street that goes all the way through both cities. It connects over the Mississippi River. Lake Street is still a lot of it. And I haven't driven down there actually in a long time, but just seeing news reports, they're still struggling. A lot of the local businesses, a lot of the smaller business owners, they didn't get a whole lot of bailout. They didn't get a whole lot of assistance from the state or the feds, so they're still struggling. The Snelling Avenue, where I used to live in Midway, they still got scars. I had my battery went out in one of my cars, and familiarity with a couple different auto zones and O'Reilly's and blah, blah, blah. And so the ones that I went to, they're still closed. They got looted and burned out. They're not opening back up. So yeah, I mean, there is still some impact. That's minor inconvenience though. I mean, that is, I can't go and buy a battery.
No, I'm not so much talking about your lack of ability to buy a battery. I'm right. more kind of saying, pertaining to the essential individuals and their livelihoods. Those things it was already hard enough when you've got a lot of restrictions and people losing out on opportunities to make money. And then you go and you just take away those inline places and you burn them to the ground. I mean, it's of course going to be a struggle. I'm more, the impact is obviously not just you can't buy a battery at that one AutoZone. it's more, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Man, I can't, every time random thought here, man, I can't think of you and cars without thinking of Buick. It's the funniest thing because I have a lot of different people who've introduced me to good music, but I liked the Roots. And then I took a ride with Dave around St. Paul in his Buick.
Oh yes.
Just bumping some Roots. Cover to cover.
Buick Regal, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, you're always gonna make me think of Buick and the Roots, and every time the Roots comes on, my Brooke and I will either say, "Damn, we got rooted," or "God damn you, Dave, why did you do it?" Because then we're hooked. Then we're stuck. We're stuck in a root hole.
You had a lot of time to think about all those things, haven't you?
Oh man, yeah. It's just a fond memory. I think it's a funny thing. It's it's a lot of, like I said, you're a fucking cool dude, man. I'm glad to have you as a friend. And then having you out there dealing with all this is, and you look the way that you light up when you're talking about your family, man. I remember having a conversation with you at my house when you were in Tucson, and if I talk to 5 or 6 different friends and I'm asking them about where they're looking at themselves 10 years from now, a lot of them would always kind of have that, well, I don't know if I want to have a family. I don't know if I want to do this. And I'm one of them. I didn't know. I don't know. And you were one of those guys who was like, nope, I want to have a family. I want to have a couple kids. I want to be a good dad. I mean, you're kind of following through, man. You're being the good dad. You're getting your own band. Basically, you got your band.
Baseball team.
Yeah, you and your two athletic super sons.
Yeah, we'll see. Warren is a tall little beanpole, and Holden is a small little bowling ball.
And you're loving every minute of it.
I mean, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I love being a dad, but fucking parenting sucks, man.
Thank you for being honest about it, right?
Oh, that's for sure. I mean, I ain't got no qualms about, like, my boys are great. I love them. To do anything for them. I'd give anything for them. But when I mean, a 3-year-old has a certain way about them. And that way is, I'm going to scream in your face, and I'm not going to do anything unless I think that it's going to be advantageous to me.
Oh, man.
Or if it's not exactly what I want. I'm going to tell you all at once, I want 5 different things, and 3 of those things are contradictory to each other. And then when I ask follow-up questions, I'm not going to answer you. Right? And honestly, the answer to everything
sounds like dating in high school to me.
Do you want an applesauce?
Sounds like dating in high school to me.
The answer to everything is, do you want an applesauce? And the answer is always yes. But it's funny, a huge challenge, and I haven't had a challenge like this in my whole entire life. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I'm one of those people that's like, oh, I love a great challenge. I always am looking for the next challenge. No, motherfucker, I want to have some relaxing times. I don't always want to be fucking challenged. I want to sit down. I want to watch a movie. Easy.
I look for the lack of challenge. Yeah.
It's like do I live to work, or do I work to live? Right? Like, I'm not just looking for the next thing. I mean, that's obviously where I differ from a lot of people. I don't have that overall entrepreneurial drive and that thing. But I do good work. I work hard when I need to, but I don't just look to work all the time. I want to enjoy life. I want my work to support my life. Well, and my life is more than just me being a worker.
Well, it's part of what I was alluding to, man. No, it's part of what I was alluding to in saying, you're one of those guys that you want on your side. I think you're 100% not a sellout, right? And that's really difficult to, and I don't want to make that sound like anybody who's any portion of a sellout's a terrible person, but I think we all know that it's rare to come across somebody who's just not a sellout, right? Whatever it is. And maybe that's a little luck or a little hard work and, maybe a lot of different things, but you're not. You're thoroughly who you are, unabashed. And the thing that's interesting is that it works for you in your line of work too, right? Because that's part of, it's not just you doing something you don't believe in. You believe in what you do. Yeah. And I mean, absolutely. Where did does that just come from your awesome upbringing and your spectacular family?
I mean, you've met my parents.
I have. I mean, I didn't mean that sarcastically. That's the thing. It sounded sarcastic. I'm just jealous. I mean, they're truly beautiful people.
Yeah, and they're actually here today. They're watching Holden today. Yeah.
Oh, Grandma and
Grandpa, they watch them on Fridays.
Say hello for me, please.
Yeah, I will. I absolutely will. I'm not. I mean, I don't know. Tracking that thing, like I said, I'm just going to be honest. I'm not one of those folks that is, looking to build a life so that I can write an autobiography or a memoir. I'm just looking to live it. And
you fight so that other people can do that too. Like as mild and I know that you're kind of taking the wind out of it a little bit. And certainly if you were quiet and not out there speaking up for any other person, I give it to you, right? It's this thing. I'm not that guy. But I mean, you're making sure that somebody who puts their time in and works hard every day has the opportunity to just kind of do exactly what you're describing, right? That just has the ability to do the simple thing of just enjoying their life and not having to be this person who's out there trying to write a memoir or build a life to write a memoir, or, you know,
right.
I mean, I respect the shit out of that.
Well, man, I appreciate that. I mean, I hope you know that I feel the same. You know, I think that the one thing that you said kind of in your intro is, you know, this idea of the trades and kind of the value that I think we place on it. I think that value is becoming greater and greater socially, the social value that we, you know,
yeah, no,
not always recognized within like the monetary value of something, but like the importance of things, and you know, being able to rely on a skill like that. That's something that I've always envied about you, is that you got a really, really well honed and expert skill at your disposal that you've developed, and it's something that it's like, you know, I can go in and I can make an argument about somebody's situation. I can look at evidence, and I can poke holes in the way that people have come to a particular conclusion, but being able to see something from start to finish, it's a completely different skill set than what I have, and I've always envied that about you. Envied. I mean, I've been I admire it in you. I admire that about you.
You don't envy anything else but this one little thing. Everything else, you're kind of like, I'm better than him.
Oh yeah. We also started the conversation that way.
No, you know, just I don't really talk about it that much, but yeah, I have a history in construction, and that's what he's talking about. I you know, and it's to what you were referencing about what I was talking about was before we started recording, but I'll bring it up now. I just watched a PBS NewsHour that had a video article that had Mike Rowe giving his 2 cents on
the opera singer.
Dirty Jobs opera singer. Yeah, but
he is. He's an actual opera singer.
His voice is amazing. Yeah. No, you can tell when he speaks. No, but he you know, he is kind of mentioning what you're saying, is that the perspective is shifting from where there had been a stigma for trade-oriented jobs. And for me, I think I experienced that stigma because I was sort of dense about that. Like, I never took any shame or anything. I just enjoyed being independent. And then every now and then I would come across a homeowner and I'd get into some sort of discussion about any topic that I was into. And somewhere in the middle of it, every now and then, you know, this fairly successful person on their own right would sort of go, why are you doing this? You know, why do you choose to do this as a living? And I always kind of found that so trivial. And it's just because I didn't see it that way, right? I didn't see myself in that same lexicon or whatever. But so I was kind of dumb to it. And then, you know, I made a good living. I mean, it really supported me through a lot. And I love being able to build and change my environment. And I think it's a useful set of skills, like you said, but it's cool to hear that there's this bigger embracing of how necessary it is, and how there shouldn't be this, oh, why are you doing that? You should go to college and become a lawyer or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not so much that there's anything wrong with that, but there's a good career to be had, and there's an honor in a hard day's work. And I like that. That's like, I don't think that that's something people can't do with, right? Like, you can be a millionaire and still have started, you know, knowing how to work with your hands and knowing the value of a hard day's work. I like that guy. I like that millionaire better than, say, somebody who got it all from their dad and, you know, dodged the draft and became some sort of comic book fictional
spurs in their heels.
You know, I mean, I'm just pulling from straws here, but I like the guy
this imaginary character
off the top of my head, right? Let's go the extra mile. Let's just, so that people know I'm not being rooted in the real world. Let's just say he's this ridiculous orange color with like luck troll style hair. I mean, what other kind of let's say he wears
somehow he
a silly tie, like a very long tie,
to an excellent amount, but doesn't topple over.
Right, exactly. And he's always got like pointy pinkies when he talks. I mean, I don't know how much I don't have that good of an imagination. I feel like I'm running out of ideas to make what I think would be the most ridiculous compilation of traits to ever possibly be conceived of as an actual president. Okay,
how do
I'm just
humans
a rich
actually
person.
combine these things to make one particular individual?
I mean, is it literal? It's like you can't write it. You could not write that character better. It's just insane.
Villain. Fucking villain.
Well, and so look, while we're alluding to it in our own cynical, funny way, now that you're, something else we were talking about before we hit the record button, and something I wanted to ask you about because it's something I deal with too.
Yeah.
There's clearly a difference of opinions between people we know closely, right? For me, it's family. There's definitely friends we have in common.
Mm-hmm.
And, you and I were just kind of going over how we view politics. And you were actually, I hadn't spoken too much, but you were saying in that moment that you were different than where you were, 15 years ago. And that at one point you thought you might be somebody who'd be interested in being out there and taking the argument to them. And what I'd like you to do is to kind of revisit that because I didn't record that and I wanted to. I want it because I think a lot of people are going through what you're talking about how they see themselves and how they see, politics, and that they're kind of steering clear of it. I mean, I'm doing that myself in a lot of what we're talking about episode to episode. I think in the beginning it was right there during election season, so it was like almost no way we could not talk about politics on every one. And now I'm glad to sort of be away from it. But how I still have to deal with it is in those relationships. So, I'm going about my way of dealing with it, which I'll get into in a second, sure, as a reaction to you. But why don't you tell me about kind of revisit what you were saying about your differences and where you were and how you see yourself in politics from back in the day and where you are now? And then secondly, how have you chosen to deal with some of those, maybe I'll say more, I don't want to say stubborn because I don't want to take out anybody's, right to believe whatever they want to believe, but let's say the more confrontational, people who want to be more trolling about it. Like, how have you managing that? And then we'll kind of go over that. Two-part.
Yeah. So two-parter. I'm going to take the second part first. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of why I got involved in what I do, I mean, I was, very interested in politics and history, and I double majored in anthropology and history in college, and was always gone out and voted, always been kind of on the left side, but my I guess development, my evolution has, I guess as the fever pitch of things that happen both on the left and the right have increased over the years, my interest in being involved in those has definitely decreased, and I've pulled away from that. And it's difficult in my position because I'm inherently tied to the political machinations of our state. I represent public sector workers, and our ability to negotiate for wages and benefits and the economics of what working people go through is dependent on the amount of revenue that comes into the state. It depends on the amount of taxpayer money that goes towards those types of things. Public sector workers are always in the crosshairs of the right. There's the old adage of if you want to be a lazy worker, go and work in the public sector. Go and work for the government. But the folks that I represent now, they're the folks that make this state run. They're the ones who have the education, they have the experience, they have the know-how and the fortitude to continue on, even in times of pandemic or of quote unquote belt tightening that Republicans like to put out there. They're the ones that continue to go to work every single day to make sure that the services that people rely on, and that even if you're saying, no, I don't want to have my taxes increased, but I want to have nice roads, those two ideas don't always exist in the same universe together. But
No, they don't.
I am just so tired. I mean, I'm tired of it on the right. I'm tired of it on the left. I think the best way that I've been able to find for myself when I've had to go out there and either do phone banking or door knocking for during the political season is, you have your opinion. That's fine. Do not try to push it on me. We can talk. I'm not gonna fight with you about shit though. Because anything that anybody's doing right now, they're not trying to convince the other side. The last thing that I'll say about that is that
right.
with that in mind, that there is no convincing. There is just I'm going to scream louder than you. Is this idea that compromise is such a bad thing to do? I've been reading some Washington Post and Politico articles about this new freshman class where, and this is even worse than in 2010 when they said basically that compromise is a dirty word. We're not going to do that. Well, how do you govern a country, a state, a city, a county when you're not trying to reach agreement on an issue? I mean, that's one way of saying you're compromising. In fact, that's exactly what it is. You're you're trying to find the middle ground. And one thing that I do and have learned over the years in my profession is that I used to be I hate management. I hate the employer. The employer is always bad. Labor's always good. Type of representative. And I'd go into my grievance hearings and my arbitration, pound my fist on the table and point my finger and you're wrong, we're right, that kind of thing. The amount of cases that I was able to resolve was very low because when you take that bent, nobody wants to work with you. Nobody has any faith that you're going to be somebody reasonable to reach agreement with.
Reasonable? Yeah.
So there's not even any attempt. But now, I mean, it's like the only way that we're able to get to any kind of resolution for anybody, that goes through this process, even as an individual or goes through the political process as, trying to advocate for an issue, is that they're trying to find resolution to the issue. Resolution is going to come in many, many different forms, and it may not come all at once. And that's what we need to get back to is, are we a solutions-oriented society where we're trying to actually find solutions, or are we just trying to get our scorecard to be higher than the opposing side? And I think that's where I came from, was like, fuck everything else that my opponent is doing. But it's like nobody goes to bed happy at that point. Nobody has any any solace. There's nothing to move on to if you're just going to continue to hash out that same fucking fight every single time. And I guess,
well, it's just about the fight. Like it becomes about the fight in those cases. Like the only people that benefit from that climate are anything that you can profit from ratings, because then all you want is the conflict and all the disagreement. You want hard boundaries because you're not going to get a lot of viewers so with compromise. We can point at them.
Yeah, we need to have people out there that we can vilify, so that it makes us feel better about our position, and it makes us feel better that we're the ones that are being victimized. Which is what a pathetic way to go throughout life, in my opinion. But I think also at the same time, the way that I've very much been able to stay out of that is just, I don't do social media. Like, I just don't do it.
Yeah, I've been outside of the social media loop for a good, like, I literally got back onto Facebook because of this podcast. Mm-hmm. And I don't really even have that much. And look, I'm growing into the, we're going to have all of the different ones probably. Like, I'm going to have Twitter. I'm going to have every one of them. I'm going to be managing at some point. I don't really want to, but I might. Instagram. I mean, all that's coming down the pike for me, and I'm so reluctant to do it, mainly because I steered clear of it in 2010 and kind of wore it as a badge of honor that I wasn't involved with it, for a good decade. And I don't think there was anything genius about it. I just think I was one of those nerds that knew what it could be for trolling, from being a gamer, for being on other chat rooms or knowing what 4chan and 8chan were, I kind of had an idea of what could happen there and was disinterested. Plus, I wasn't really trying to look people up or, oh, remember me from this. And I wasn't that guy,
right.
But I mean, I take your point,
I did have a Facebook account for quite a while. And I mean, I think it still exists. I haven't touched it in probably 5, 6, 7 years. I'm not even sure. The last time I tried to log into it, though, what's that?
It's pretty funny to go back on there after that period of time, though, because then you'll catch up with everything people have been sending you for a decade.
Well, and I tried, but they think that I'm a Russian bot. I think it was 2016 when I tried to go. Maybe it was 5 years ago. And they were like, oh, well, we need to verify your identity. You need to scan and send us your driver's license. And I was like,
you're the one they did that with? Huh? You're the one person they did that with before it got totally taken over by bots and likes.
Like, I mean, it's just like, what do you think I am? I know my password, and I don't know. But at that point, I was like, I'm not going to scan my ID and send it to you. Like, fuck you, big tech. Like, you don't get to do that. And then I had logged in one time before, I think a couple of years even before that. I was like, I guess I should just check it. And the first thing on top of on the top of the newsfeed for me was one of my high school classmates had died from a heart attack. So I was like, gonna log off there. That's all I need to fucking see. I don't need to be here.
Picker upper.
Right. So
so like kind of to the second part, I cut you off before you answered the second part. Like, we're talking about this. We both kind of feel the same way. How do you deal with your more outspoken friends from the other side, as it were?
Yeah. I just ignore it.
You've just been kind of avoiding it?
I just ignore it. I mean, I think that there's, back to the point of the engagement piece, like these whatever you want, whatever adjective you want to use for trying to put this kind of message out there, whether you're a troll or you're just, you're a provocateur, or like however you want to characterize it, they're not looking for dialogue. Nobody's looking for dialogue by saying the shit that's out there that they say. They're looking to see who is going to agree with them and who is going to disagree with them, and then they vilify the people that disagree with them.
I think they get more pleasure out of that bad reaction. I do, right? Yeah. They want that. They want that sour reaction so that they can exploit it and get some fun poking at your buttons.
Absolutely, and I think that the person that we both know, that's what they do all the time. It's who that person is. It's who that person always has been. And one of my closest friends, was one of the reasons why. Because a lot of times it's hilarious.
Yeah.
But now that it's moved into this world. I
have those friends, yeah.
Now it's moved in this world, it's actually taken on a dangerous tone to it. And, on January 6th was the day that I was shown what this person had put out there in social media world. And I just said I can't not say something, because January 6th was a dark day for our country. And regardless of your political leanings, if you can't agree with that, then you're fucked. And, seeing somebody lie about what was put out there and what happened on that day, about who were the people that ransacked our nation's capital, I just said enough. Enough. One of the things that also, I think, feeds the fire for folks wanting to say these outrageous and ridiculous things is because when you give them oxygen, it burns a lot brighter. But on the flip side of that coin, it's like when people don't say, you're full of shit, and I know you're full of shit, and I'm going to call you on it, the people that whoever that individual is that put the first message out there was, and the people that are considered their friends to say, what the fuck are you doing? Like, that's important too. This person's still my friend.
I agree with you. Yeah.
But it's, I saw them just, a few probably a week and a half later, at the funeral.
Yeah.
And we were fine. I mean, it was, but I literally sent the messages to this person and said, you know, I saw what you had posted. You're full of shit. This is what happened. Like, you can't call it anywhere else. Like, if you're supporting of this fucking movement, and you did what you all said you were going to do, and now you're going to be like, oh, it wasn't us. It wasn't us. Like, why don't you stop being a child? Why don't you stop being such a snowflake? The term that you guys like to throw out about the left all the time. You're being a snowflake. Just fucking own it. Like, this is what you guys fucking did.
Own it. Loss is a loss.
Yeah, be a fucking adult.
Yeah, look, I tried to put a spin on it. No, but I mean, I'm with you, because I mean, I've called New Orleans Trumplandia plenty of times, and always tried to draw sort of what you're describing. You know, you want to confront those things up front, and then when you see your friends and they have that, you're still okay. You know, one of the things I've mentioned, the stories I've mentioned that happened to us is New Orleans is very lucky about dodging hurricanes. Since I've been here, hurricanes haven't hit us directly, and then one hit us directly last year, and a couple of doors down, a tree had basically was leaning on the house, had been, you know, sort of pushed over. And I mean, look, I guarantee you, you know, we're around a bunch of people that we don't agree with politically, and my neighbor is one of my, unfortunately he's moving now, but I mean, I have my own like home improvement style Wilson character as a neighbor, you know, like this 93-year-old Creole wise man who
never knew what he looked like.
No, I mean, all the fits is here a mess, so I knew exactly what it was like. But you know, it was a lot of our conversations were right there, and you know, he was really that classic conservative from a time gone by. You know, voted Republican, but we would have these great discussions where I found he and I would have so many more things we would agree on. Even when we disagreed, it was cordial. It's always the like, I feel like Republicans that are closer to my age are not necessarily conservatives. Whereas I don't have a problem getting along with, I never have an issue getting along with conservatives. I have issues with some hardcore, you know, Republicans who aren't, in my opinion, reasonable, you know. And so how I've chosen to deal with them in like your case is like, you know, like when we all came out to go and check on our neighbor, the whole community was out there trying to band together and see if they needed help and what we needed to do. And nobody was talking about their political views.
Yeah.
And I mean, and so it's like, right. And then I think, like you're saying, if it's a discussion, one of the, like, you know, you were saying that you were one way 15 years ago and you've come to some realizations. My realization is, you know, using another old adage about horses to water and making them drink. My version of that is, and this is specifically to like interfamily political debates, right? Is you can get that horse, you can make that horse drink, but that horse will never follow you again. And I think
it right in your face.
Well, or if they let's say they don't spit it in your face. Let's say it's digested, it goes through. That relationship is now different.
Yeah.
And that's where I've kind of go about it with a little more, like I'm more interested now in why that is their conclusion. Like I ask more questions now, like, you know, and not in a debate oriented sense. Like more just, okay, I want to understand. I'm trying to understand, like, how did you connect those dots without, of course, anybody that starts leading me down a QAnon pigeonhole. I just kind of hit the hard brakes and go, yeah, okay, you're not interested in that rationality. Yeah, but you know, I that's the best I've been able to do. I certainly have that. I'm torn. I mean, I feel like we had that same thought as younger men where we think maybe we would want to be out there and be a voice, but I think the roles that are more important are the ones that are not so on the mic. You know what I mean? Like what you're doing, you're
people that are making things work, not the ones that are out front.
They're behind the scenes. I know it's not sexy to say they're the electrical, plumbing, and framing of a house. I know that's not a great sexy metaphor, but it's so important. It's foundation, man. I mean, the foundations, you can't do anything without good foundation, and people like that, whether it's nurses or any blue collar, is the foundation of the whole country. And I think we've learned that in COVID ultimately. And and I think that's one of those things. I just hope that we can pull it together. Hopefully guys like you and me who can conversate can make it a little easier for people.
No, and honestly, I mean, I think that it's that kind of it's that mentality that's needed more at the forefront anyway. And it's becoming more and more important. I mean, the people that are getting up there, the Matt Gaetzes of the world, or Josh Hawleys, or AOC, or Andrew Cuomo. I mean, these folks that like to be out there. I mean, sure, they're smart people.
I feel like those guys.
We need the people that have a little bit more.
I feel like the Gaetzes want their own talk show, man.
Who?
I feel like Matt Gaetz wants to be Sean Hannity. Yeah. Right. Like, I feel like that's his that would be a more appropriate environment for that guy, is his own, Chiron ridden television show where he could just use away all the Aquanet he wants and go off on a rant. I think that's what he wants.
He is the next Tucker Carlson.
That's what it seems like. Right. I have a hard time with guys like that. Yeah. I don't think I could have a good rational conversation in that case, but.
Well, no, there's nothing rational about what they want to talk about. But I mean,
that's why I'm glad you're out there, Dave.
But I think, I mean, even back then, I mean, I was encouraged to, people would be like, "Oh, well, you should run for, I'd support you for this, that, or the other thing." It's like I don't want to be there. I don't want to be out there. But I think it's important that more and more important every single election cycle that we have reasonable people be out there, not just the ones that are the loudest. People that want to solve problems, they want to have
a
conversation about what are resolutions that we can find. And I know all politicians kind of put it out there. I want to solve this problem, I want to solve that problem, but it's like you don't need to have a great campaign message, but you just need to show work. You just need to show that you're willing to put in the work. And I just don't think that's not the prevailing attitude that leadership that people think about leadership in, and I hope that's changing. I hope that.
Well, and I also, I hope so too. I do think that there's this lost art of conversation, and to a further point, just being able to advocate for yourself and know how to put that into words. I think if I had to put my money on the kind of role somebody like yourself plays in the world, it's that. I think that to a much more personal extent, that's what maybe I get a chance to do on behalf of my wife, because she's somebody who's had her own medical struggles and whatnot. And there's just clearly a lot of people who are not comfortable or skilled or naturally talented at being able to communicate thoroughly what it is that they need, want, are dealing with. And I do think it has a lot to do with many topics of education and whatnot, but I don't think there's enough people that are out there communicating for them. And it's part of why you're on that list of who I wanted on the show. I mean, you're a friend of mine, obviously, groomsman, love you to death, but it's what you do and who you are out there, man. Like I said, I'm glad you're out there doing what you do.
I appreciate that, brother.
Thanks for doing the show, Dave.
I mean, it's
always
fun to see the next evolution of Chuck Langley, Charles Langley,
Triple C, Charlie Chuck Charles. Who knows what the hell to call me?
Charles, yeah.
No, man. Look, I'm gonna take this moment to wrap it up and invite you back for another episode. Maybe just come on and be a co-host or sit on. We're gonna do panel episodes and things, but
you're just dude. I'd love to do that. Man. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I'd love to have you more often. I'm glad you took part in it, and thanks for giving us a chance to kind of put you on stage and like for anybody listening, I mean, yeah, right. It's the wonderful Dave. It's just that you represent sort of, I think there's a lot of people who don't know. Like there are people who will never know or understand unions, union reps, what you're doing, who it associates with. And, you know, this wasn't a podcast focused on that specifically, but just on the kind of person that would take the time and energy to do it. And I think we're all kind of feeling what you're going through, man.
And one thing that I guess I'll just leave is it's becoming ever more rare because you don't have the grandfathers or the moms or the dads or anybody that kids are around, right, to come home and to talk about union issues, talk about working life issues. You know, what people see about working life is going to be what's framed for them by Forbes or Bloomberg Business Weekly, publications that I do read, and I enjoy reading them as well. I think that there's a lot of insight when you look at the economics of the way it works, or the business side and the interests, the competing interests that are there quite a bit. But, you know, people are interested, you know, go through labor history. Go and understand the trucker strike that happened in Minneapolis in the 1930s. You know, go and read about Cesar Chavez and the farm workers in the Southwest. You know, take some labor history courses. In St. Paul, there's an independent library called the Freedom Library that it's all about labor history, and those gems are out there for people to discover, and I do hope that they will. Because one part of it is the work, but also is just having the union consciousness that work matters, it needs to be respected, and it needs to be invested in a much more serious way rather than what we've been doing since the 1970s and 80s. So, an uplifting last note from me.
Well said. No, that's a good uplifting last note, Dave. I'm really, like I said, I think happy to know that there are people out there that get paid to try to keep the world as fair as possible to the guy who's putting the muscle and sweat and stress into the world to try to keep everything going along like it should. I think I'm going to leave it at that. Let me do my fancy little sign off here, bro. I appreciate your time. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks again, guys, for listening. That was a really good episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. Remember that we are brought to you by the Ruminations Radio Network. There are more than just my podcast on the network, and you should check us out at www.ruminationsradionetwork.com. We have a lot to offer, a lot of variety, and hours of entertainment for you to fill your crazy little head with. And we hope that you check us out soon. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.